Hello and happy Monday. Some positive news tonight. Starting this Friday, the hotel quarantine period for inbound travelers at the airport will be cut down to 3 days in addition to the day of arrival. On top of that, there will be an additional 4 days of medical surveillance. Timothy Lee has the story.
A sigh of relief for travelers from overseas and Taiwan, as the relaxed measure will allow visitors to undergo quarantine at designated hotels for 4 days instead of 7. They can also choose to have their 4-day medical surveillance either at home or at other hotels. During the surveillance period, they will be given a yellow health code. If their daily RT test results remain negative, they are permitted to take public transportation, go to work, and enter malls and markets to purchase daily necessities. But they cannot visit premises requiring the vaccination pass, such as restaurants, bars, arcades, gyms, and beauty parlors. They also cannot enter care homes for the elderly and the disabled, and designated healthcare premises. They are also banned from visiting schools as guests or participating in mask-off activities. If infected, their health code will revert to red, and they cannot go outdoors.
The main purpose is, while we can control the threat to public health, society can go about as normal as possible, and the competitiveness of Hong Kong can be maintained.
Using data from last month, the government noted that an estimated 4% of travelers flying into Hong Kong were infected, with half of their conditions confirmed at the airport, while fewer than 1% tested positive for COVID on the 3rd day of quarantine.
呢個風險水平呢
Secretary of Health Lo Xiongmao pointed out that the risk factor of new arrivals in the city are low compared with local infections. He added that prolonging the current week-long quarantine is not cost-effective. Upon Friday, the government will identify the day of arrival for inbound travelers at the airport as day 0. They will then spend 3 nights at designated quarantine hotels before they can choose to either leave at noon or the afternoon on day 3. From the 4th to 7th day, the travelers must continue their medical surveillance, accompanied by daily RT tests and PCR tests on specified days after their arrival. On the final day of the new measure, the yellow code will turn blue for uninfected individuals. They will have to self-conduct health examinations for the next 3 days. Authorities announced that those who previously booked for 7 days of quarantine will be refunded, and those who are already quarantined can leave after providing negative test results in the upcoming days. Meanwhile, the government noted that designated premises such as restaurants will update their Leave Home Safe app's QR codes to check whether a person is trespassing with the red or yellow health code. The government reminded the public that those who attempt to bypass the system using offline phones, which show outdated QR codes, will not succeed. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The quarantine cuts for travelers were welcomed by the tourism industry and business groups, but they also called for a further easing of quarantine rules for Hong Kong to reconnect with the world. Jackie Lin reports.
Because of pandemic restrictions, many Hong Kongers are itching to travel abroad after being stuck in the city for more than 2.5 years. While some are happy about the quarantine relaxation, others worry more infections could be brought in from overseas. Right after the latest 3+4 quarantine measures was announced this morning, some travel agencies rolled out more trips for 2 to 4 people to Japan, Southeast Asia, Europe, and the US. One tour operator says inquiries for these tours have doubled today. But other agencies aren't getting their hopes up, with concerns that the number of flights available won't keep up with the demand. Meanwhile, most business groups welcome the quarantine cuts in unison, while urging the government to allow the entire quarantine period to be spent at home.
We think this is the right step towards better measures to facilitate more freedom of travel. This will help revive Hong Kong's economy to some extent, although we need to be aware that even this 3+4 proposal is still very stringent compared with most international cities.
The Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce appealed to the public to get vaccinated so the city could reach conditions for quarantine-free travel both internationally and with the mainland. Together with the Chinese Manufacturers Association, the chamber also proposed allowing new arrivals to enter more venues that don't hold mask-free activities, such as exhibition centers, allowing more ease for business exchanges. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The city reported 4,040 new COVID-19 cases, with 7 more COVID-related fatalities. Some 3,800 of the new infections were locally transmitted. Over 12% of the cases involve the BA4 or 5 Omicron subvariants. More than 40 Jockey Club staff members attended a virus-hit private gathering on August 1st. At least 13 of them tested positive for the coronavirus. The Jockey Club has closed 6 off-course betting branches for deep cleansing until further notice. Meanwhile, the chief executive of Caritas Medical Center, Nelson Watt, tested positive last Thursday. He didn't come into contact with patients during the incubation period. A 20-month-old baby girl was sent to the intensive care unit after contracting COVID. Health authorities have reminded parents to pay attention if their child displays symptoms of croup, the inflammation of the larynx and trachea, which could be fatal to young children.
There are increasing number of children with the syndrome called croup. If you find your child who has suffered from viral infection, for example, COVID-19 infection, and show difficulty in breathing, some high-pitched sound during the breathing, please bring the child to see the doctor as soon as possible, because the infections can be a life-threatening situation.
The mainland logged 807 new COVID cases today. The pandemic situation in Hainan province continues to worsen as the island accounted for 504 infections, including 413 cases in Sanya. Sanya, currently under lockdown, has announced it has finalized the choice of location for its second field hospital. The city is preparing 25,000 isolation rooms in premises, including hotels and school dorms. The city of Haikou also implemented a temporary citywide static management from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. when public movement is limited and public transportation halted. Meanwhile, Zhejiang and Guangdong both reported less than 100 cases. Bangladesh has sought Chinese help to repatriate Rohingya refugees to Myanmar during a visit by Foreign Minister Wang Yi. China brokered an agreement in November 2017 to repatriate about 700,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees who fled persecution in Myanmar earlier that year. Despite attempts to send them back, the refugees refused to leave. The situation in Myanmar was exacerbated by the military takeover last year. Meanwhile, during the same visit, Wang Yi has again lashed out at U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's recent visit to Taiwan. Wang said Taiwan is not part of the United States, but Chinese territory, and that Washington has been engaging in sophistry on the Taiwan question. He said China's actions on Taiwan have been just, appropriate, and legal, adding that the moves are aimed at safeguarding China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Bangladesh has issued a statement reiterating its support for the One China policy. A ceasefire deal declared late Sunday to end nearly 3 days of fighting between Israel and a Palestinian group in Gaza is holding. Israel said it was partially reopening crossings into Gaza for humanitarian needs and would fully reopen them if the situation stays calm. Nazvi Karim reports.
The night sky over Israel's southern coastal city of Ashkelon. These were among the last explosions caused by Islamic Jihad rockets fired from Gaza before a fragile truce took hold. This Ashkelon family filing into an in-house shelter as air raid sirens wailed above them. The Egypt-brokered ceasefire deal ended nearly 3 days of fighting between Israel and Islamic Jihad. It was the worst violence since Israel and Gaza's Hamas rulers fought an 11-day war last year, adding to the misery of the blockaded enclave. Islamic Jihad's Tehran-based leader Ziad al-Nakhala said in a press conference the group had become even more powerful after Israel's attacks. The fighting started last week when Israel launched a preemptive strike that killed Taisur al-Jabari, one of Islamic Jihad's leaders in Gaza. They later killed a second senior commander, Khalid Mansour, whose funeral was held on Sunday with thousands of mourners turning up. In response, Islamic Jihad fired almost 600 rockets into Israel, most of them destroyed by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. A few, though, threatened the skies above Tel Aviv, forcing Israelis on the streets to scramble for shelter. Gaza officials say 44 Palestinians were killed, including 15 children and 4 women, with 311 others wounded. On Sunday, the funerals were held for 4 children killed in Gaza's Jabalia area, an incident that both sides blame each other for. According to Israel, it was caused by a Palestinian rocket that landed inside the Gaza Strip. Hamas, which has largely stayed out of the latest conflict, says all Palestinian deaths were the result of Israeli bombings. In a statement, US President Joe Biden said he wanted an investigation into the Jabalia incident, adding that the United States has been working with Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Egypt, Qatar, Jordan and others to resolve the conflict. Islamic Jihad is hoping the Cairo peace brokers will work to secure the release of top leader Bassem al-Saadi, whose recent arrest in the occupied West Bank fueled Israeli fears of an imminent revenge attack. However, neither Egypt nor Israel have commented on whether it is part of the truce deal. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Welcome back to TVB News. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for access to a Ukraine nuclear plant at the center of shelling accusations by Russia and Ukraine. This as Kiev is urging more sanctions on Moscow, this time on its nuclear sector. Matthew Bray has details.
Antonio Guterres has been outspoken on nuclear issues recently and was calling for restraint in Ukraine as the two warring sides scrap over the Zaporizhzhia plant.
Attack to a nuclear plant is a suicidal thing, and I hope that those attacks will end. And at the same time, I hope that the IAEA will be able to have access to the plant and to exercise its mandate competencies.
Ukraine says Russian shelling damaged 3 radiation sensors and injured a worker Saturday. The plant was captured by Russia in early March, but is still operated by Ukrainian technicians. While the damage reports from either side cannot be verified, the notion that the plant is front and center of shelling alarms most observers. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said Sunday, if Russia goes ahead with referendums in occupied areas of the country on becoming part of Russia, there can be no talks with him or Ukraine's allies. Russia holds most of the Kherson region in the south, and officials down there have suggested a referendum could be held in weeks or months. Moscow already claims people's republics in the Donbass. Grain ships are continuing to depart the Ukrainian ports of Odessa and Chornomorsk bound for Turkey first, in an effort to get 20 million tons of grain out of Ukraine to feed millions elsewhere. The deal is in place for 4 months. What happens after that is unclear. 6 vessels received the green light Sunday to leave as analysts warn Russia was moving troops and hardware in the region of the southern ports to head off a counter-offensive by Ukraine. British intelligence said over the weekend fighting will shift to a 350-kilometre front line, extending from the nuclear plant at Zaporizhzhia to Kherson. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
U.S. President Joe Biden has arrived in his home state of Delaware after testing negative for COVID-19 for the 2nd consecutive day. It was the first time Biden had left the White House since becoming infected with COVID-19 last month. The president tested negative on Saturday and Sunday, clearing the way for him to emerge from an isolation that lasted longer than expected because of a rebound case of the virus. Biden told reporters he was feeling great before boarding Marine One outside the White House for the flight to Delaware. During his isolation in the White House residence, the First Lady remained in Delaware. Mexican and Venezuelan teams have joined Cuban firefighters to help tackle the out-of-control blaze at an oil tank farm started by lightning on Friday night. The fire had already spread to a second tank. Now the aim is to keep a third tank cool in the hopes of preventing the fire reaching more of the site. The strategy is to let the fire burn out in the first two tanks. 17 firemen are missing, presumed dead, as conditions are too dangerous for any search to be undertaken. Some 120 people have been injured. 5 of them are in critical condition. The fire crews from Mexico and Venezuela are experienced in tackling fuel blazes. Back here at home, a police investigation into the falling video screen at Canto pop band Mirror's concert on July 28th is ongoing. Mo Lee, the dancer who was seriously injured in the incident, remains in intensive care at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The government task force looking into the incident said earlier that it may have been caused by a wire cable snapping because of metal fatigue. It is understood the task force will look into whether this could occur to the same type of wire cable used at other concerts, as well as the cause of the metal fatigue. The task force has yet to decide when it will convene its next meeting. And in sports, former Manchester United star Ryan Giggs arrived at court today ahead of his domestic violence trial. The record 13-time Premier League champion and ex-Wales manager is accused of controlling and coercive behavior towards his now ex-girlfriend, Kate Greville, between August 2017 and November 2020. He is also charged with assaulting Ms. Greville and causing her actual bodily harm at his home in Worsley, Greater Manchester, on November 1st, 2020. As well as common assault against her younger sister Emma in the same alleged incident. Giggs has not managed a Wales match since his arrest in November 2020. That's the news. Thanks for watching.